Hi, I'm Adam,
This is Kevin.
and we are Tech Guys Who Invest. This is the place for business people and investors to learn all about investing. We offer a fresh perspective on what it's like to have a day job while investing, and we share lessons learned on our investing journey. Our vision is to educate and entertain you while adding tons of value to your daily commute. Welcome to our show. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Tech Guys Who Invest. We think you're going to like today's topic, but I want to kick it off by asking Kevin if you've picked up any new habits or routines during this unusual COVID period.
Yeah, actually I have, and it's a habit or a routine that I never in a million years saw myself picking up, and that is running. And people who know me very well, especially when I was younger, I was adamant about not running. I would make every excuse in the book to not run. The only way I would run is if I was in danger. Not for exercise or anything like that. I hated cardio. I'd find some other way to do cardio. And with the quarantine and being stuck at home, I got to get out of the house. And I like being in the sun, which is great being here in Florida, although it's been really hot. But besides the point, I enjoy getting out there. So I'll go out for a run, listen to a podcast, or listen to some music, depending on how I'm feeling. And it's a nice place to meditate, if you will, without actually meditating. And when I started running, when this whole thing happened, I started running kind of about half a mile to a mile. I was really, really slowly progressing. I'll run a half a mile here, then the next week I'll do a mile, really slowly. And as of now, I ran 5 miles yesterday on Saturday.
Wow. Congrats, man.
Thanks, man. And it's just progress, right? You got to just keep going at it. I try to run about 3 times a week. But one thing I'll tell you is living in Florida, you have to get out before 8 or 9. Because once that sun's out and it rears its head, good luck.
Well, especially this time of year. Yeah, it starts getting humid early.
Oh, yeah. And even at night, man, like if you look at the real feel, sometimes it's still upper 90s at like 7 or 8 o'clock at night.
Oh, yeah.
It's miserable. But anyways, so what about you, Adam? Have you picked up any habits or any hobbies?
Not really a hobby, but something that I've kind of added to my morning routine. One of the first things I do when I get up in the morning now is I walk outside and watch the sunrise. So I've taken to doing that. And because I'm working from home and I don't have the commute, I've got a little bit of extra time in the morning. So I'm still doing my morning routine, but I'm finding myself pretty early on in the day walking out on my front porch and kind of looking in the direction of the sun. And man, I got to tell you, I just enjoy that so much. I'm one of those people who really finds a lot of connection to God through nature. Like some people do, like people have different connections to God or the universe or your spirituality, however you kind of think about that. But for me, it's definitely through nature. So seeing the sunrise and these awesome colors in the sky, especially, that's one cool thing about Florida. I don't know if it's like all of the extra humidity with the ocean and the air having that moisture in it, but the clouds just do amazing things at sunrise and sunset, and I'm getting all these just beautiful colors on most mornings. I'm loving it, man.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love the idea of waking up to watch the sunset. I haven't thought about that, but I should probably try and do that when I'm running and pay attention to what the sun looks like.
Oh man, yeah, I just love it. The colors are amazing. So it's kind of cool though that is something I've never done. And now, like at this time of my life, I find myself doing that. And it's kind of an interesting thing to notice and maybe to ponder. And it also ties a little bit into what we're going to talk about today, right?
Exactly. So one thing that I'm seeing, at least on my social media feeds, is people are finding themselves with more time to pick up habits that they wish they had done earlier. And ultimately, the theme of today's episode is it's not too late to start investing. Honestly, the earlier you can, the better. But just because you're at a certain age, it's not too late. And from my experience being 31, it always feels like there's somebody that's younger that's starting earlier than me. So that being said, that's great for them. But for our listeners who are still on the fence, kind of trying to figure out where they want to go or if they feel like it's too late, that is definitely not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this definitely hits home with me, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about it here in a minute. But also, with regard to age and investing, it's not too early to start if you're on the other end of the spectrum. So if you're listening to our show and you're a younger person, we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So it's not too early to start. And then for some of the older folks who listen to the show, it's certainly not too late to start. And I know I have experience with this because I didn't get started until I was already in my 40s and, mid 40s about. And I feel like it's definitely not too late, even if you're older than that. I mean, I really don't think there is an age where it's too late to get started.
Well, speaking of if saying how you started in your mid 40s, if you were to take that and kind of wind the clock backwards and say you started in your mid 30s, how do you think your strategy would have changed?
Well, that's a good question. How would it have changed? Um, Maybe I would have felt like I needed to make up so much ground. So perhaps I wouldn't do some things I think I need to do to accelerate. And, it may have even taken me longer to do the things I'm doing. So, I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It'd be hard to say. But I found myself gravitating towards commercial multifamily or apartment investing fairly quickly. And one of the things going on in my head was, how can I rapidly accelerate this the fastest? That's what I found. So that's my strategy. But if I was younger, maybe I wouldn't have. Well, also, when I was younger, maybe I wouldn't have thought I could. This is a little bit to our point here today, but maybe I wouldn't have thought I could do what I'm doing right now. And maybe I would have had to experience buying some rentals first, buying some plexes first, and then growing into it over time as I got to know more about it. Whereas a little bit older, I just went for it pretty early on, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that definitely could factor into it. How do you think it's kind of shaped your strategy being where you are, Kevin, and being at the age you are?
Yeah, I'm still in my early 30s, and it's interesting because the younger you are, you feel like you should take more risks, and I'm not disagreeing with that because in theory, you have a greater amount of years to recoup if something goes wrong. However,
Yeah.
it's in my personality just to be more conservative with the way I invest. I have this tendency to think about the worst case scenario for any situation, and if I can cover the worst case scenario, then I'm not worried about it anymore. If I've gone through the checklist of, all right, this is how I'm going to cover my downside. Once that's covered, then that burden is lifted. And I do my best to follow the process to mitigate the risk and then see where it goes, right? Because there's always a risk when it comes to investing. And one thing that I recognize now that we've been doing this for a couple of years is that you have to define what risk is. And it's a four-letter word, but it is so complex and it differs for every individual depending on where you are in life.
I think that makes a big difference on what you decide to invest in and what your investor identity is based on your age. And we have a tool actually that we're offering. By the time this episode releases, we'll probably have it up. So go ahead and check tgwipodcast.com and see if it's up yet. But you should understand your goals really well. Your age and what you're investing for will drive that. And then based on those goals, you'll want to form your investor identity or what it is you focus on. It'll really help you with getting started, assessing those risk levels, and determining how you're going to invest, what you're going to invest in. So, that's definitely something to consider. That ties directly into your age, but you should invest. It's not
Yes.
that you shouldn't because you're too late. It's just what you choose to invest in may be a little bit different.
And as far as being younger, the biggest risk that I'd say I took when I was younger is not taking the action of learning to invest. For me,
Yeah.
that was, if I could go back in time, I would tell younger Kevin to say, you need to start learning about this. Start networking, start asking questions to people that are doing what it is you want to do. But ultimately, you got to figure out what it is you want to do first. So start getting educated. And that is probably the greatest risk that I made, was not actually learning about it when I was younger.
Yeah, education is going to be huge no matter what your age, and especially if you're older and you're thinking, "Gosh, is it too late?" I would say it's definitely not, and educate yourself. Really learn what it is you need to know to get started, to take action, and what it is that you should be doing to invest based on your situation. So, that just takes some time and effort. That's all there is to it, right?
I would also think about your peers, the ones you're closest to. I would ask them, "Hey, what are you investing in?" Because if, generally speaking, if you're hanging out with that person, they may have similar lifestyles that you're experiencing together. So asking them and what they're doing, how they're looking at things. The reason I say that is because it provides a different perspective on the same issue. How should I invest? You hear the way somebody else thinks about it, and then you can hear that information from somebody else and interpret it differently. So it's just a different way of thinking about how to assess risk, but it's also helping you find out what really matters to you because you're learning it from your peers, and that, I find that to be quite helpful too.
Yeah, I think asking other people's smart advice, I think you should consider where they are. So if the people that who you are asking don't seem to be further ahead than you or where you want to be, consider that. Good to hear their thoughts. But then maybe try and seek out a few people who are ahead of where you want to be, and see if you can ask them. And they'll often give you some really good advice.
Yeah, ask
Um,
them
yeah,
retrospectively, what would you have done
exactly.
differently?
Exactly. Yeah. They may be older than you. They may be the same age. They may even be younger than you. But think about where they are financially and their, uh, financial intelligence. What is
Yeah,
that? Right.
it's interesting because just some examples. I'm working with an investor who's about the same age as I am, and he wants to invest. And we have the conversation about how long do you want to have your money out for? He's like, the time doesn't matter as far as how long it's out. As long as it continues to work, I'm happy. And
Nice.
on the other end of the spectrum, I have another investor who he is much older than me, probably been retired for a while now. And from his perspective, he told me, he's like, I don't plan to be alive in the next 30 years. It's too hard for me to make that type of a commitment for time. Right. So a long time for a young person is very different than a young time than an older person. So those are things to consider when it comes to where you're at in your journey too.
Yeah. And one thing I did want to mention to people who may be thinking, I'm a little too old to start investing in real estate, or I'm a little too old to start investing in something that I don't understand or I've never known much about. There is a book called Late Bloomers by Rich Karlgaard. It's absolutely transformational book. And it really doesn't matter what age you are. I highly recommend you read that book. It it does a phenomenal job of explaining that no matter how old you are, it's not too late. And most people actually don't hit their stride in life and really become s- successful or meet their full potential until they're actually quite older than most people think. So, very interesting book, Late Bloomers by Rich Karlgaard. I'll put that in the show notes.
Fantastic. So how do you recommend people start if they're either too young or too old? If they feel that way, not that they are. What if they feel they're too young or too old to start?
Yeah, I think we mentioned education, and it's got to start there. Maybe step zero is think about your goals, really clarify your goals and articulate those, write down your goals, and then start to educate yourself about what you can do to help yourself meet those goals. We've got the tool I mentioned earlier that'll help you start to identify your investor identity, which would help you then align to your goals and pick a path to start educating yourself. How about you, Kevin? Anything I missed there that you would add?
I would agree with that 100%. And I just further the point of sharpening that focus, because if you were to say, I need you to cut down this tree, or I need a log, and you have no idea how to cut down a tree and amongst a bunch of trees in a forest, it's overwhelming. But as soon as you focus on that one tree and say, all right, I'm going to chop this tree down, and that might be one asset class or one aspect of investing, it becomes much easier mentally to think, okay, yeah, this is attainable. I can read this book. I can read this chapter. If I said start investing today or start learning, it sounds overwhelming, but go small, but think big.
Yeah, it's awesome. As Stephen Covey said, sharpen that saw. If you want to start cutting those trees down, start sharpening that saw now. So thanks everybody for listening to the show. And if you want to talk more about this, or if you would like to discuss with us how you might be able to get started, or if you feel like you're a little bit too old for this and you're just not quite sure what to do next, reach out to us. We'd love to help you out. We'd love to give you some ideas if we can, and talk to you. We really like to hear from our listeners. So you can reach us at techguyswhoinvest@gmail.com or find us on tgwipodcast.com.
Thanks, everybody.
That's it for this episode of Tech Guys Who Invest. This is Adam.
This is Kevin. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast for the latest episode updates and to receive additional investor insights to help you invest wisely and safely. You can join the TGWI Insiders community at tgwipodcast.com/subscribe. Lastly, we would love to connect with you. The best way to reach us is by sending us an email at techguyswhoinvest@gmail.com. Thanks, everybody.